The night air in West Des Moines felt sharper than Eleanor Whitaker remembered. Maybe it was the pain medication wearing off, or the strain in her abdomen after gallbladder surgery. But as she stepped out of the rideshare and onto the familiar walkway leading to her son's house, she felt a quiet relief. Home, she thought, or at least the place she had come to call home these past 3 years. She imagined Michael opening the door with that boyish smile he once had, asking if she needed help with her bag. She imagined Samantha pretending not to worry, but hovering all the same. She imagined her grandson running toward her with the same excitement he had before things changed. But none of that happened. Instead, her suitcase sat upright on the porch, the handle extended, as if someone had placed it there like a delivery they didn't want to sign for. Taped to the top was a single sheet of paper. Even before she touched it, she knew it wasn't anything good. The handwriting was Samantha's, sharp, slanted, impatient. "It's just the 3 of us now. Find another place to stay." Eleanor read the sentence twice, then a third time. Her first instinct was that this had to be a mistake. Maybe Samantha meant something else. Maybe she'd left the wrong note. Maybe she was angry about something trivial. Maybe, but no. The meaning was too direct, too final. Her abdomen tightened as she knocked on the door. "Michael." Her voice wavered. "Michael, sweetheart, I'm home. Can you open the door?" Silence. She knocked again, louder this time, bracing herself with the porch rail so the movement wouldn't pull at her stitches. "Michael? It's Mom. Please open the door. I just got discharged." Still nothing. Then, as she leaned forward to knock a third time, she caught a flicker of movement behind the living room curtain. Her grandson's face, small, confused, familiar, appeared in the sliver of space between the fabric and the window frame. Their eyes met for only a second. His expression crumpled toward concern, the way children instinctively understand when something is wrong. Before she could speak, a hand yanked him back. The curtain fell into place. Eleanor's breath left her chest in a slow, painful exhale. She lowered herself onto the porch step, her body trembling from exhaustion. 3 years ago, she had sold her modest Beaverdale home, the house she and Harold had shared for nearly 4 decades, and put $178,000 into remodeling this one. New kitchen, new roof, new floors, rooms added for future grandbabies. She had given everything she could, believing she was securing a home for the family she loved. Now she couldn't even get through the door. After a long moment, she reached for her purse and counted the bills inside. $43. That was all she had on hand. The rest of her accounts were in Michael's area of town, and she didn't have the strength to walk. Her phone battery was low. Her stitches ached. Her head felt light. She lifted her suitcase handle and pulled it down the driveway, step by slow step, until she reached the bus stop at the end of the street. The bench was cold, but she sat anyway, keeping one hand pressed gently against her upper right abdomen where the incision pulled under her coat. The neighborhood was quiet, holiday lights still hanging from a few porches, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, cars passing occasionally but never slowing. Eleanor sat with her eyes closed, steadying her breath against the ache in her body and the deeper ache spreading through her chest. When her phone finally buzzed, she opened her eyes. A message from Martha Jenkins, her closest friend for more than 40 years. "I'm coming. Stay where you are." Eleanor didn't cry, not yet. She simply nodded to no one as a single cold wind brushed past her, and she waited alone on the bench until Martha's headlights appeared in the dark. Martha's house smelled faintly of chamomile tea and old cedar, the kind of scent that made people breathe a little deeper without realizing it. Eleanor sat at the edge of the floral sofa, hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to keep her thoughts from scattering in every direction. The warmth of the room should have comforted her, but everything inside her felt cold, disoriented, fragile. Martha placed a blanket over her shoulders before sitting down beside her. Honey, tell me everything, she said softly. Eleanor tried. She explained the suitcase on the porch, the note, the silence behind the door. Her voice cracked halfway through the story, but she kept going, because if she stopped she feared she wouldn't start again. When she finished, Martha shook her head slowly, disbelief turning into something sharper, protective anger. He didn't even check if you were okay after surgery. Martha asked. Not one person opened that door. Eleanor swallowed hard. I kept knocking. I called his name. Nothing. Her phone buzzed then, breaking the heavy silence. For a fleeting moment, her heart lifted. Maybe Michael was finally replying. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding, a terrible one, but still fixable. But no, it was only a delivery notification from the hospital pharmacy. She opened her messages anyway and typed another text to Michael. I'm safe at Martha's. Please call me. Within seconds, the message turned from sent to read. But no reply came. The tiny read receipt felt like a blade. Martha watched her closely. He read it. Eleanor nodded. Did he say anything earlier today? No. She set the phone face down on the coffee table. He hasn't said anything at all. A moment passed before Martha leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Eleanor, when you moved into their house 3 years ago, did you sign anything? Papers? Agreements? The question startled her. Just some tax forms, Eleanor murmured. At least that's what Michael said. He brought them to me one afternoon and said it was just household paperwork for the remodel. I didn't think to question him. Martha's expression darkened. Did you read them? No, Eleanor admitted quietly. I trusted him. Martha stood and fetched Eleanor's purse from the armchair. Let's check your accounts. Eleanor hesitated, but she agreed. Her hands seemed to tremble more with each step as she logged into her banking app. At first, the numbers didn't look strange. Then she scrolled. What on earth? She whispered. Several line items jumped out immediately. Nordstrom, $3,200 Sephora, $1,700 Furniture Gallery, $4,500, all from the past 3 weeks. All while Eleanor had been preparing for surgery and recovering. None of them were her purchases. Martha exhaled sharply. Samantha, she said, these are all her stores. She buys from them all the time. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. She was using my cards, my accounts. Then you need to freeze everything right now. Eleanor nodded, swallowing the sting building behind her eyes. She moved from page to page, shutting down every credit card, every line of payment, every account that Samantha could access. Each freeze felt like a small, measured breath, necessary, painful, but grounding. When it was done, Eleanor sat back, exhausted. The truth was settling into her bones now, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress or miscommunication. This wasn't temporary. It was betrayal, quiet, deliberate, and already far too deep. The phone rang late the next morning, just as sunlight began slipping through Martha's lace curtains. Eleanor had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her suitcase on the porch. That cold note taped to the handle. She reached for the phone with a shaky breath, hope flickering despite everything. Michael, the screen read. Her heart lifted and then braced. She answered, her voice soft and careful. Michael? Honey. But his tone was nothing close to gentle. Mom, what did you do? He snapped. Why did you freeze all your credit cards? Samantha's trying to get things for the kids, and the transactions keep getting denied. It's embarrassing. Eleanor blinked, stunned. You're calling because of the cards. Of course I'm calling because of the cards, Michael said, irritated. Samantha's been running errands all morning. She said the system kept flagging your account. You need to fix it. Eleanor sat a little straighter on Martha's sofa. Michael, I froze the accounts because someone used my cards for nearly $10,000 worth of purchases this past month. Nordstrom, Sephora, Furniture Gallery. None of that is for the children. The line went silent for half a second. Then Michael scoffed. Mom, really? You're making a big deal out of nothing. Samantha bought a few things for the house, and she got some things she needed. That's normal. $3,000 at Nordstrom isn't normal, Eleanor said quietly. Neither is $1,700 at Sephora, or $4,500 for new furniture when the old set was perfectly fine. Michael exhaled sharply, the sound full of annoyance. You're blowing this way out of proportion. You always do this, always so sensitive, always assuming the worst. Samantha is trying. She's doing her best to manage a house, 2 kids, and you. Eleanor froze. Manage me? Well, yeah, he said, as if it were obvious. You need help. You can't expect us to cover everything while you sit around worrying about receipts. Her breath caught. I just had surgery, Michael. And Samantha has been stressed. She's been doing everything. And now you're making things harder by freezing accounts we all rely on. Do you know how inconvenient this is for us? The word S landed like a blow. He wasn't worried about her recovery. He wasn't asking where she slept last night. He wasn't even curious why she had left the house with nothing but a suitcase. He cared about the money. Only the money. Michael continued. Look, just unblock the cards. Samantha needs to get groceries and school supplies. You're being dramatic. Eleanor stared at the floor, her fingers trembling. A long, quiet truth settled over her, painful, steady, undeniable. Her son wasn't calling out of concern. He wasn't checking on her health or safety. He wasn't asking where she was or how she felt. He saw her as a funding source, a convenience, a wallet, not a mother. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I won't unfreeze anything. Michael. He inhaled sharply, offended. You're unbelievable. No, she said, her tone steadying. I'm finally seeing things clearly. She ended the call before he could respond. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty, it felt honest. 2 days later, Eleanor stood beside Martha in the driveway of the West Des Moines house that had once felt like a second chance at family. The winter sun cast a thin, pale light over the siding, revealing every new shingle, every replaced window, every improvement she had paid for with the proceeds of the home she and Harold had spent 40 years building. The place looked polished, immaculate, nothing like the modest house it had been 3 years ago. Martha shut off the car. You ready, sweetheart? Eleanor nodded, though her stomach felt tight. I just need to get my things. They approached the garage, the door already half open, as if someone had prepared for their arrival, but didn't want the confrontation that came with opening the front door. Inside, boxes were stacked unevenly, the tops caved in, dust settling in the corners like no one had bothered to check them for weeks. These were not the boxes of someone who cared about her belongings. These were boxes of someone trying to move her out of sight. Eleanor stepped inside, slowly, lifting a lid on one of them. Inside were sweaters she'd knitted, folded carelessly, a jewelry box missing its top, a few holiday ornaments wrapped in wrinkled grocery bags. None of it was arranged the way she had packed her home before moving in. Someone had tossed her life into cardboard as if cleaning up a spill. Good Lord, Martha whispered. This is disgusting. Eleanor sifted through the next box, her breath catching when she found the empty case where Harold's watch should have been. She checked under towels, under loose cords, under mismatched shoes. Nothing. Another box held bits of kitchenware. But the delicate china set passed down from her mother wasn't there. She checked 2 more boxes, growing more frantic. Martha, they're gone, she said. The watch, the china, my albums. They were all in my room. They're not here. Martha clenched her jaw. They better not have thrown them away. Eleanor swallowed hard before walking toward the house. I need to check upstairs. Martha followed her to the door leading into the kitchen. But before they stepped inside, voices drifted down from the second floor, Michael's low and tense, Samantha's sharper and clipped. Eleanor froze. We have to move quickly, Samantha was saying. If the listing goes up next week, we can get buyers walking through before she becomes a problem again. Michael sighed. We just need the house sold. Once it's done, we can look at that nursing facility in West Des Moines, the one with the good reviews. Mom won't fight it if it's already arranged. We'll tell her it's temporary, Samantha replied. She'll go along with it. She always does. Eleanor's breath trembled in her chest. She pressed a hand over her heart, steadying herself against the doorframe. A nursing home, not out of concern, not because she needed care, but because she was inconvenient. Martha's face tightened with fury, but Eleanor shook her head, signaling her to stay silent. They listened for another moment. Michael continued. Look, she's too emotional lately. And with the sale price going up because of all the upgrades she paid for, all the more reason to do this now, Samantha hissed. I'm not waiting for her to come back and complicate everything. Eleanor stepped back, not trusting her legs to hold her. The words sliced through her like something sharp and cold. But beneath the hurt, beneath the shock, something else stirred, something steady. Resolve. She straightened, her voice soft but anchored. I've heard enough, she whispered. Martha touched her arm gently. What do you want to do? Eleanor looked once more toward the stairs, her eyes burning but dry. We take what's left, she said, and then we move on. Her heart was breaking, but her will, finally, quietly, was beginning to harden. Eleanor stood at the base of the stairs, the voices above still echoing in her ears. The pain in her chest was sharp, but beneath it was something steadier and colder than she'd felt in years. She stepped back into the kitchen, Martha close behind her, and waited. It didn't take long before Michael appeared at the top of the staircase, startled to see them. Mom, he said, his brows tightening. What are you doing here? Eleanor lifted her chin, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. I came to get my belongings, and I heard you talking. She met his eyes directly, something she rarely did anymore. You plan to put me in a nursing home. Michael stiffened. That's not what you think. It's exactly what she thinks, Martha cut in sharply. We heard everything. Samantha appeared behind Michael, arms crossed, face already set in annoyance. You weren't supposed to come inside. We left your things in the garage for a reason. Eleanor took a step forward. Is that why my mother's china is missing? Why Harold's watch is gone? Why my photo albums aren't there? Samantha shrugged. Whatever wasn't important, we tossed. That house is ours now. We need space. Eleanor's breath trembled, but she held her ground. That house would not exist without the money I gave you, without the home I sold, without the life Harold and I built. Michael's expression hardened. Mom, stop. The house isn't yours. Your name was never on the deed. You moved in with us. That's all. His words landed with a heavy finality. Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly, not from weakness, but from the clarity snapping into place. The forms she had signed 3 years ago, the ones he'd called tax papers. He had brought them to her kitchen table, urging her to sign so the remodel could go smoothly. She hadn't read them. She had trusted him. Her voice came out softer than before, but firmer. Those papers I signed, they weren't for taxes, were they? Michael's jaw clenched, and that was answer enough. Martha's eyes flashed with anger. You tricked her into signing away her rights to the house, and now you've stolen her heirlooms on top of it. She stepped forward, her tone sharp as glass. If those items aren't returned immediately, I'll call the police. Elder financial abuse is a felony in this state. Samantha scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, Marta replied. I'm being patient. Dramatic comes next. A long silence stretched across the room before Michael finally threw up his hands. Fine. We'll look again, but you two need to go. Eleanor didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't try to understand their reasoning anymore. She walked back to the garage with Martha, retrieving the last few boxes that held scraps of her old life. Some sweaters, a few books, a tarnished picture frame. A quilt she had stitched 20 years ago. Not much, but hers. They loaded everything into Martha's car. As Eleanor closed the trunk, she looked once more at the house she had poured her savings, her trust, and her love into. And then she turned away. They left with what little was recovered, and with the quiet beginning of a boundary Eleanor had never drawn before. The morning after retrieving the last of her belongings, Eleanor sat in the small office of the Wells Fargo branch she had used for years. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, the room too bright for how tired she felt. A financial advisor named Karen, kind-eyed, patient, pulled up Eleanor's accounts on a wide monitor. Let's take things one step at a time, Karen said gently. We'll review your income, assets, and what you can comfortably afford going forward. Eleanor nodded. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, as if tidiness could steady her nerves. Together, they went through every line. Your Social Security and Harold's pension come to about $2,400 a month, Karen summarized. That's a reliable baseline. Eleanor exhaled softly. It wasn't much, but it was something. More than she feared she'd have after being pushed out of Michael's home. Your savings are still intact, Karen continued. Michael didn't have access to those. And she clicked to another tab. Harold's life insurance payout from years ago, $42,000, is untouched. The number made Eleanor blink. She had almost forgotten about it. Harold had left it as a safety net for when you need it most. She never imagined this would be the moment. Karen lowered her voice kindly. You have enough to start over, Mrs. Whitaker. It won't be luxurious, but it will be yours. The word yours landed gently, like a blanket draped over her shoulders. By noon that same day, Eleanor and Martha toured a small senior apartment complex near Greenwood Park. Tucked between quiet residential streets and walking paths lined with old oak trees. The building wasn't new, but it was clean and peaceful. Warm beige hallways, a community kitchen, soft voices drifting from the lounge where residents chatted over tea. The unit available, a modest one-bedroom on the second floor, had sunlight streaming through the windows and a view of the treetops. Not large, not fancy, but safe. I'll take it, Eleanor said, surprising even herself with how steady her voice sounded. Within a week, she signed the lease. The apartment came mostly unfurnished, but word traveled quickly through the community center Martha volunteered at. One afternoon, a group of women Eleanor had never met arrived with gently used furniture, an armchair, a small dining table, a nightstand with a functioning lamp, and a faded but charming rug. A retired carpenter donated time to assemble a donated bookshelf. A neighbor offered extra blankets. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed as item after item found its place. You're not alone, one of the volunteers told her, squeezing her hand before leaving. That night, when Eleanor lay in her new bed, clean sheets, a soft quilt, something inside her eased for the first time in months. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was the absence of fear. Days later, Martha encouraged her to attend a support group for older adults facing neglect and financial exploitation. Eleanor hesitated before walking into the basement room of the community center, but the moment she stepped inside, a quiet warmth wrapped around her. The group consisted of 8 people, men and women, all older, all carrying invisible weight. The facilitator, a woman with silver hair and gentle eyes, invited everyone to share at their own pace. Eleanor listened first. Stories of dismissive children, stories of stolen savings, stories of being treated like burdens, stories of being used. Each word echoed her own private pain. When she finally spoke, softly, haltingly, the room didn't judge her. They didn't question her decisions or her trust. They simply listened. And some nodded, their expressions saying, "I know. I've been there too." For the first time since her surgery. Since the night she stood alone on that porch. Eleanor felt seen. She felt understood. And gently, quietly, she felt herself beginning to heal. 6 months passed in a rhythm that felt almost gentle. Eleanor settled into her new apartment near Greenwood Park, each week growing a little more familiar, a little less fragile. She spent mornings sipping tea by the window, afternoons walking slowly along the park path, evenings attending the support group where she had begun to find her voice again. Her life wasn't the life she'd imagined at 68, but it was hers, and it was peaceful. That peace shattered the moment she opened her mailbox, one cool spring afternoon. Inside sat a thick white envelope from a real estate company in West Des Moines. Eleanor frowned. She hadn't inquired about any listings. She tore it open carefully and slid out a formal letter printed on glossy paper. "Congratulations on the successful sale of your property at 421 Lakeview Drive. Final sale price, $685,000. Funds will be processed and disbursed per the agreements on file." Eleanor's heart lurched. Lakeview Drive, Michael and Samantha's house. Her house, or rather, the home she'd poured her entire life savings into sold. Sold under her name. A cold tremor moved through her. No, this can't be right. She read the letter again, her eyes tracing every line as if a different meaning might appear on the second try. Her name was listed, Eleanor M. Whitaker, her signature, even though she had never touched a single closing paper. Her knees weakened, and she gripped the back of a kitchen chair to steady herself. Martha found her like that 10 minutes later when she came by to drop off fresh muffins. "Eleanor? What's wrong? You look pale." Eleanor silently handed her the letter. Martha scanned it quickly, then again more slowly, her expression darkening with each line. "They used your name. They used your name to sell the house." "But I'm not an owner," Eleanor whispered. "My name was never on the deed." Martha set the letter down with a thud. "Someone forged your signature. That's the only explanation. This is illegal as hell." The words hit hard. Illegal. Forged. Fraud. Each one heavier than the last. Eleanor felt herself trembling. Why would he do this? Why? "Honey," Martha said firmly, placing both hands on her shoulders, "we're going to fix this. But we need a professional. Someone who knows elder law inside and out." There was only one person Martha trusted enough for that. An hour later, they sat inside the dim, wood-paneled office of Arthur Reynolds, a retired attorney in his 70s who had handled elder financial abuse cases for decades. His reputation in Polk County was impeccable. He had known Harold long ago, and he had always spoken to Eleanor with genuine respect. Arthur adjusted his glasses as Eleanor handed him the letter and the attached documents. He didn't rush. He read each page slowly, methodically, flipping from one sheet to the next with the calm precision of a surgeon. When he reached the final page, he exhaled through his nose, a deep, knowing sound. "Martha," he said quietly, "you were right to bring her here." Eleanor clutched her hands together. Is it real? Did someone actually sign my name?" Arthur rotated the papers toward her and pointed at the signature line. "This is not your handwriting, Mrs. Whitaker. Not even close." Her breath hitched. He continued, voice steady but edged with anger. "This is a textbook forgery, and not a very good one. They traced elements of your old signature from your bank forms, but the pressure, the angles, The slant, it's all inconsistent. Eleanor felt the room sway for a moment, her pulse loud in her ears. She pressed a hand to her chest. Arthur leaned closer, his tone gentle but firm. You've been the victim of identity misuse and elder financial abuse. And now that the property has sold, this has crossed into serious criminal territory. Martha placed a hand over Eleanor's. We're not letting them get away with this. Arthur nodded. No, we're going to handle this properly. And for the first time since the letter arrived, Eleanor felt something flicker inside her, not fear, but the faint, steady spark of resolve. The mediation room inside the Polk County Legal Center was colder than Eleanor expected. A long oak table divided the space, its polished surface reflecting the overhead lights. She sat on one side with Arthur and Martha, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She had slept little the night before, but her posture was straight, her chin lifted. Something inside her had shifted. She wasn't here as a scared mother. She was here as someone wronged. The door opened sharply. Michael and Samantha walked in with their attorney, a tall man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as James Porter. Samantha didn't meet Eleanor's eyes. Michael did, but only for a moment and only with irritation. They sat across from her, as far down the table as possible. Arthur opened a folder. We'll begin with the forged documents, he said calmly. Porter leaned back. My clients maintain they followed all proper procedures. Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid copies of the real estate documents to the center of the table. Mrs. Whitaker's name was used without authorization in the listing agreement and again at closing. Her signature appears on documents she never saw, much less signed. Michael rolled his eyes. Mom probably forgot. She signs everything. It's not her fault if she... Arthur cut him off, sharp and unwavering. Mrs. Whitaker's handwriting has been professionally verified. This, he tapped the signature, is not hers. In fact, it is a clear trace job. Whoever did it even replicated a curvature from an old bank signature card. Samantha flinched. Arthur continued, sliding forward more papers. We also have evidence of unauthorized use of Mrs. Whitaker's identity. Her name, her personal information, and her presumed approval were used to execute a property sale of $685,000. Porter's jaw tightened. We dispute the characterization of unauthorized. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Then please explain how your clients intended to receive funds from a sale involving a party who legally wasn't even on the deed. Silence. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Samantha's hand trembled as she adjusted her blouse sleeve. And lastly, Arthur said, we have documentation of financial exploitation. He produced Eleanor's credit card statements, columns of luxury charges during the weeks she was recovering from surgery. He placed them in front of Porter. These were made without Mrs. Whitaker's knowledge or consent. Samantha's voice cracked. Those were for the house and the kids. I didn't mean, you meant exactly what the charges show, Arthur replied coolly. Mrs. Whitaker was being used. Michael's composure finally began to crumble. This is ridiculous. She lived with us. We paid for so much. You put her belongings in your garage like trash, Martha snapped, unable to stay silent. And you threw away her mother's china. We haven't forgotten that either. Porter raised a hand, trying to regain control. Let's focus on solutions. What is Mrs. Whitaker seeking in compensation? Arthur looked to Eleanor, giving her the floor. Eleanor's pulse thudded softly in her ears, but her voice came out steady. I want what I put into that house. She held Michael's gaze unblinking. $178,000. And interest. Michael's face drained of color. Mom, we don't have that kind of money. That isn't my problem, Eleanor said quietly. Arthur added, at a standard civil interest calculation for 3 years, that totals $188,000. Porter whispered something to Michael and Samantha. They whispered back, frantic but hushed. Finally, Porter straightened. My clients can offer $150,000 within a week. Martha opened her mouth to protest, but Eleanor gently touched her hand. That's acceptable, Eleanor said. Her voice was soft, but there was something unshakable beneath it. Arthur nodded. Then we'll document the settlement. Funds must be transferred within 7 calendar days. If not, we proceed to litigation, which, given the evidence, will not end well for your clients. Porter swallowed. Understood. Michael stared at the table. Samantha wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Whatever defiance they had brought with them was gone now, dissolved under the weight of what they had done. The paperwork was drawn up and signed. Eleanor's signature was slow, deliberate, her pen steady as it touched the page. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost along the way. When the mediator collected the final forms, Eleanor exhaled a long, quiet breath that seemed to lift something from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she wasn't shrinking back or apologizing for existing. She wasn't being pushed aside or spoken over. She had stood up for herself and stood her ground fully, clearly, unmistakably. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a new strength rooted itself, quiet, solid, and entirely her own. 1 year later, the rhythm of Eleanor's life looked nothing like the fragile days that followed her surgery and exile. The small bakery she and Martha opened in East Village, Maple and Hearth, had become a neighborhood treasure. What started as a modest idea, born over cups of tea at Martha's dining table, had grown into a bustling morning stop for office workers, parents on school runs, and retirees who lingered over cinnamon rolls and conversation. The bell above the door chimed constantly from 6 a.m. onward. Eleanor's cinnamon pear loaf had become a local favorite. Martha's blueberry scones sold out daily. Some customers dropped by simply to see the kind ladies with the warm smiles. Others came because they knew Eleanor's story, how she had rebuilt her life from nothing but resolve, and they wanted to support her any way they could. The community wrapped around her gently, consistently, without pity. It was healing in a way she hadn't expected. Every morning before unlocking the door, Eleanor would stand inside the shop and breathe in the scent of rising dough, vanilla, and freshly ground coffee. Joy lived in those small moments. Real joy. Joy she could feel in her bones, steady and quiet. On a warm May afternoon, she was wiping down the counter when the bell chimed again, this time with a hesitant, almost fragile sound. She looked up. Michael stood in the doorway. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. His face was drawn, his eyes sunken, the confident posture he always carried replaced by a slumped weariness. His clothes were wrinkled, and his hair, usually trimmed neatly, was unkempt. "Mom," he said softly. Eleanor set the cloth down slowly. "Hello, Michael." He stepped closer, but kept his eyes on the floor. Samantha left, took Andrew with her. "I haven't seen them in months." His voice cracked. "She drained the accounts. Every dollar I had." He swallowed hard before continuing. "And the settlement, I paid it, but it wiped me out completely. I don't know what to do." The words hung between them like a trembling bridge. For years, Eleanor would have rushed in, comforted him, offered money before he even asked, shouldered every burden. But a different woman stood behind the counter now. A woman who had been thrown out into the cold without a suitcase or a second thought. A woman who had rebuilt her life plank by plank. Michael finally looked up. "I need help." His voice was small, almost childlike. "I need a loan. Just something to get me through." Eleanor's heart tightened, not in anger, but in an old, familiar ache. She saw the boy he once was and the man he had become. And she saw the line she needed to draw, clearly, for both of them. "No, Michael," she said gently. He blinked, surprised. "No." "I can't lend you money," she continued, her tone calm, steady. "That path nearly destroyed both of us." A long silence followed. Michael nodded slowly, as though absorbing the weight of that boundary. Eleanor stepped around the counter. "But I can offer you something else." He looked up again, uncertain. "A job," she said. "Here, part-time to start. You'll earn your own pay. You'll rebuild your own life. And you'll do it honestly." His breath wavered. You'd give me a job?" "I'll give you the chance," she replied. "The rest is up to you." For the first time in decades, the air between them felt level. Not mother and dependent son, but two adults learning to navigate a new, healthier truth. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a beginning, and a boundary, both rooted firmly, finally, in respect. By late summer, the bakery felt like a rhythm Michael could finally keep up with. He arrived early, swept the front walkway, wiped down tables, and learned to knead dough under Martha's watchful eye. He didn't talk much at first. Shame sat heavily on him, shaping his posture and quietness. But he showed up, every day, and slowly, the space between him and Eleanor shifted. Some mornings, she caught him glancing at her the way a person looks at something they once took for granted and are only now learning how to value. Other mornings, he offered to carry flour bags from the back storage or stayed late to wash dishes without being asked. They rarely discussed the past. The work became their language, steady, unhurried, respectful. Their relationship didn't transform in an instant. It was more like the slow thaw after a long winter. A tiny warmth here, a softer exchange there, an apology that wasn't spoken out loud but lived quietly in effort and consistency. Eleanor accepted it, not because she forgot, but because she had finally built a life in which forgiveness didn't mean losing herself again. Outside the bakery, another gentle thread began weaving into her days. It started with a man who visited every Thursday morning, always ordering the same thing: a cup of chamomile tea and a slice of warm pear loaf. His name was William Carter, a retired English teacher who lived near Greenwood Park. He had a careful kindness about him, the sort of gentleness that didn't rush or expect anything. Over time, their conversations stretched longer. They talked about books Eleanor loved in her youth, about classic poems William used to teach, about the odd and lovely ways life surprised people late in their years. He listened, not with the distant politeness she'd grown used to from others, but with genuine interest, as though her words mattered. One afternoon, he asked if she'd like to join him for a walk through the park. She said yes, and on that walk she noticed something. She laughed. A real laugh. Light, unguarded, free. She hadn't heard that sound from herself in years. Across the street from her apartment stood a small apple tree, a spindly young thing planted by the building years ago. During the darkest months after she'd been thrown out, it had been nothing but bare branches, a silhouette against the winter sky, fragile and uncertain. Now, as September approached, delicate blossoms dotted its branches, pale pink, soft white, trembling gently in the breeze. Eleanor paused every morning to touch one of the petals, letting the quiet beauty settle into her. It felt like a sign she didn't need to name. One evening, after closing the bakery, she sat on the bench outside her building and let the cool air wrap around her. Michael had just left, offering a shy, "See you in the morning, Mom," before heading home on foot. The words had been simple, but they carried something honest, something earned. Eleanor looked at the blooming apple tree, at its branches stretching upward as if reaching for the future without fear. She thought of everything that had happened: the betrayal, the cold porch, the forged documents, the mediation, the slow rebuilding of her life. She thought of the nights she cried in Martha's spare bedroom, believing she was too old to start over, too tired, too worn down. But she had started over anyway. Betrayal had not destroyed her. It had revealed her strength. It had led her, slowly, painfully, to a life that was finally, unmistakably her own. Not loud revenge, not public victory, just quiet dignity reclaimed, the kind that grows like blossoms on a once-bare tree, soft, steady, and full of promise for all the seasons still ahead.